I'm Daniel Garrett, licensed funeral director and embalmer at Whitestone Memorial Funeral Home in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Or at least I was until I walked away from the profession last month after 16 years of service. I graduated from the Cincinnati College of Mortuary Science in 2009 with full honors, completed my apprenticeship under one of the most respected embalmers in the Midwest, and built a career on precision, professionalism, and an unwavering commitment to treating the deceased with dignity. I've embalmed over 2,000 bodies in my career. I've handled decomposed remains pulled from the Cedar River after 3 weeks in August heat. I've reconstructed faces destroyed in industrial accidents at the Quaker Oats plant. I've prepared bodies for viewings after everything from peaceful deaths to violent crimes. And I've always maintained my composure, my skill, and my sanity. But what I'm about to tell you is the one case that shattered every certainty I had about death, the human body, and the finality we all take for granted. It's the case that made me realize there are some things in this profession that have no rational explanation, no medical justification, and no place in the world as we understand it. And it's the reason I can never step into a preparation room again. Whitestone Memorial has been a Cedar Rapids institution since 1947. It's a classic Midwestern funeral home with cream-colored siding, black shutters, and a circular driveway that winds through carefully maintained oak trees. The building itself is divided into the public areas upstairs, where families gather for viewings and services, and the basement level, where we do the actual work. Down there, we have 2 preparation rooms, a large refrigeration unit that holds 8 bodies, an office for paperwork, and a small staff lounge that always smells like burnt coffee and formaldehyde, no matter how many air fresheners we use. I'm describing all this because I want you to understand that this is a normal place. There's nothing gothic or mysterious about Whitestone Memorial. It's fluorescent lights, stainless steel tables, log temperatures, documented procedures, and OSHA-compliant ventilation systems. Everything we do is recorded, witnessed, and verified. This isn't some crumbling Victorian mansion where strange things might be expected. This is a modern, professional facility where death is treated as a medical and logistical reality, nothing more. The case came to us on October 14th, 2024, at approximately 11:30 in the morning. I remember the date precisely because it was a Tuesday, which is typically our slowest day for new arrivals. I was in the office finishing paperwork on a weekend service when my colleague, Patricia Chen, knocked on the doorframe and told me we had a pickup coming in from Mercy Medical Center. Single vehicle accident on Highway 380, female victim, age 28, pronounced dead at the scene at 9:45 that morning. The family had already selected us and wanted a viewing scheduled for Friday evening. County coroner already cleared her, Patricia said, scanning her tablet. No autopsy required, straightforward trauma case. Family wants restorative work for an open casket. I nodded and followed Patricia down to Preparation Room 1 to get the table ready. This is standard procedure. We sanitize the table, lay out our instruments, prepare our solutions, and review the death certificate and any medical information before the body arrives. The deceased was identified as Rebecca Ann Holloway, resident of Marion, Iowa. Cause of death was listed as massive internal trauma and hemorrhaging, resulting from a single vehicle collision with a concrete overpass support. Time of death, 9:45 a.m. She'd been dead for approximately 90 minutes when she arrived at our facility. The transport van pulled up at 12:15 p.m. I helped our driver, Marcus Webb, wheel the gurney down the exterior ramp that leads directly into our basement level. The body was in a standard black disaster pouch, zipped and sealed with the county medical examiner's tag still attached. Marcus and I transferred her onto the preparation table, and I began the unzipping process while he logged the arrival time in our system. The moment I opened that pouch, I knew something was unusual. Rebecca Holloway's body was still warm, not lukewarm, not residual heat, actually warm, as if she'd just fallen asleep 20 minutes ago instead of dying almost 3 hours earlier. I placed my gloved hand against her neck, then her forehead, then her upper chest. The temperature was consistent, roughly 94 degrees if I had to estimate, which should have been impossible. Bodies cool at a predictable rate, approximately 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit per hour for the first 12 hours. She should have been below 90 degrees by the time she reached us. She should have been noticeably cool to the touch. "Marcus," I called out. "Come feel this." Marcus walked over and placed his hand on her shoulder. His eyebrows went up. "That's weird. Transport van's refrigerated. She should be cold." "Check the van's temperature log," I said. Marcus pulled out his phone and accessed the vehicle's monitoring system. Unit was functioning normally, held at 38 degrees the whole trip. She was in there for 40 minutes. I frowned and made a note on my intake form. Unusual body temperature, possible equipment malfunction. But I'd seen stranger things with fresh trauma cases. Sometimes massive internal bleeding creates heat pockets. Sometimes medication or medical conditions affect post-mortem temperature regulation. I decided to proceed with the standard examination. Patricia assisted me in removing Rebecca's clothing, which was standard procedure. We photographed everything for our records, then began the visual assessment. She had significant bruising across her chest and abdomen, consistent with impact trauma from a steering wheel. Her right femur was clearly fractured, creating an unnatural angle in her thigh. There were lacerations on her forehead and left cheek. But here's what struck me as odd. There was no rigor mortis. None. Her limbs moved freely. Her jaw was completely relaxed. Her fingers flexed easily when I tested them. Rigor mortis typically begins 2 to 6 hours after death, starting in the smaller muscles of the face and hands. Rebecca had been dead for 3.5 hours by this point. She should have been showing at least early signs of stiffening. Instead, her body moved as naturally as a living person's. "Patricia," I said quietly. "No rigor." Patricia looked up from her documentation. She came over and tested Rebecca's left arm, bending it at the elbow, then the wrist. "None," she confirmed. "That's really unusual for this timeline." "Could be the trauma," I suggested. "Massive injuries sometimes delay onset." "Maybe," Patricia said, but she didn't sound convinced. We proceeded to position Rebecca for embalming. This involves placing the body in proper alignment, with the head slightly elevated and the features positioned for viewing. I was adjusting her neck position when I felt it, her pulse. It was faint, barely perceptible, but it was there. A gentle rhythmic pressure against my fingertips, where I held her carotid artery. I froze completely. "Patricia," my voice came out as a whisper. "I need you to check something." Patricia walked over. I guided her hand to Rebecca's neck. "Tell me what you feel." Patricia's face went pale. "That's not possible. She's been pronounced dead. The medical examiner certified her. There's a death certificate." I grabbed my stethoscope from the instrument tray and placed it against Rebecca's chest. I held my breath and listened. Nothing. No heartbeat, no lung sounds. Complete silence. But when I returned my fingers to her carotid artery, that gentle pulse was still there. Slow, steady, impossible. "I'm calling Mercy," Patricia said, already reaching for her phone. "This woman might be alive." I held up my hand. "Wait, listen." I placed the stethoscope against Rebecca's chest again and gestured for Patricia to feel the pulse simultaneously. She did. "There's a pulse but no heartbeat," Patricia whispered. "How is there a pulse without a heartbeat? That's medically impossible." I had no answer. A pulse is created by a heartbeat. Blood doesn't circulate without cardiac function. You cannot have one without the other, yet here we were, both of us feeling a definite pulse while hearing absolute silence in her chest. "Check her pupils," I said. Patricia pulled a penlight from her pocket and lifted Rebecca's right eyelid. She shone the light directly into the eye. The pupil didn't react. It remained fixed and dilated, exactly as you'd expect in a deceased person. She tested the left eye, same result. No response to light whatsoever. "Pupils are fixed," Patricia confirmed. "No reflex." I pressed my fingers against Rebecca's radial artery at her wrist. There it was again. That slow, steady pulse. I moved to her femoral artery. Present. I checked her temporal artery at her temple. Present. Every major pulse point in her body was producing that gentle rhythmic pressure, yet her heart was completely silent. "We need to document this," I said, forcing myself into professional mode. "Temperature reading first." I retrieved our digital temporal thermometer and scanned Rebecca's forehead. The display read 95.4 degrees. I scanned again. Same reading. A body dead for nearly 4 hours should have been below 85 degrees, especially after 40 minutes in a refrigerated transport vehicle. Patricia took photographs while I dictated observations into our digital recording system. October 14th, 12:47 p.m. Subject Rebecca Holloway, deceased 3 hours 57 minutes. Body temperature 95.4 degrees. No rigor mortis present. Pulse detected at carotid, radial, femoral, and temporal arteries. No cardiac sounds detected via stethoscope. No pupillary response to light. No respiratory effort observed. I stopped recording and looked at Patricia. We need to call Dr. Morrison. Dr. James Morrison was the county medical examiner who'd signed Rebecca's death certificate. Patricia called his office while I continued monitoring. Every 2 minutes, I checked Rebecca's pulse. It never varied. Every time, that same slow, steady rhythm. Every time, complete cardiac silence. Dr. Morrison arrived at Whitestone Memorial at 1:32 p.m. He was a compact man in his early 60s with steel gray hair and the calm demeanor of someone who'd seen everything. I walked him through our findings step by step. He listened without interrupting, his expression neutral. "Show me," he said. I placed his hand on Rebecca's carotid artery. He waited, feeling. After 30 seconds, he removed his hand and pulled out his own stethoscope. He listened to her chest for a full minute, then checked her pulse points methodically. Carotid, radial, femoral, popliteal behind her knee, dorsalis pedis on her foot. "This is impossible," he said finally. "I pronounce this woman dead at the scene. She had no pulse at 9:50, no cardiac activity, no respiratory effort. She'd been deceased for at least 15 minutes before I arrived based on witness statements. I performed all standard verification protocols." "Could you have made an error?" Patricia asked carefully. Dr. Morrison shook his head. "I checked 3 times. No pulse, no breathing, fixed pupils, no corneal reflex. She was clinically dead. I would stake my medical license on it." "So what's happening now?" I asked. "I have no idea." Dr. Morrison took Rebecca's temperature again, confirming the reading. He checked her pupils again, noting they remained fixed and unresponsive. "She has every sign of death except these phantom pulses, and this temperature makes no sense. She should be much colder." "Should we call an ambulance?" Patricia suggested. "Get her back to the hospital?" Dr. Morrison considered this. "For what purpose? She has no heartbeat, no brain activity based on fixed pupils, no respiratory function. What would they do with her? She's deceased by every meaningful medical definition except for this pulse phenomenon, which shouldn't exist." "So we just proceed?" I asked. Dr. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. "Document everything, photograph and video record. I'm going to consult with cardiology and neurology colleagues, see if anyone's encountered something like this. In the meantime, delay the embalming, keep her refrigerated and monitored." He left at 2:15 p.m., looking more disturbed than I'd ever seen him. Patricia and I moved Rebecca to the refrigeration unit. I set our alarm system to alert us every hour so we could check on her. The temperature was set to 38 degrees Fahrenheit, standard for body preservation. At 3:15 p.m., I returned to check her. The refrigeration unit's internal thermometer read 37.9 degrees. I opened the drawer and placed my hand on Rebecca's forehead. Still warm. I checked the temporal thermometer. 95.1 degrees. She'd barely cooled at all, despite sitting in near-freezing conditions for an hour. I checked her pulse, still present, slow and steady. Patricia joined me for the 4:15 check. Same results. Body temperature 94.8, pulse present, no other vital signs. At 5:15 p.m., something changed. I opened the refrigeration drawer and immediately noticed that Rebecca's position had shifted slightly. Her head had turned to the left. Her right arm, which had been straight at her side, was now bent at the elbow with her hand resting on her chest. "Patricia!" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did you move her when you checked at 4? "No, I didn't touch her, just scanned her temperature and felt her pulse." I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I'd taken when we'd placed her in the drawer at 2:15. In those images, her head was centered, facing straight up. Both arms were at her sides. Now, her position was completely different. "Bodies don't move themselves," Patricia whispered. "That's not possible." I placed my hand on Rebecca's carotid artery. The pulse was still there, but it felt different, stronger somehow, more pronounced. I grabbed my stethoscope and listened to her chest. Still nothing. Complete silence. But when I moved the stethoscope to her throat, near her carotid artery, I could hear it. A soft, rhythmic whooshing sound. Blood flow. Active circulation. Impossible circulation through a heart that wasn't beating. Her blood is moving, I said. Without cardiac function, her blood is somehow circulating through her body. Patricia backed away from the drawer. Daniel, this isn't right. This isn't natural. We need to stop. We need to call someone. Call who? I demanded. And tell them what? That we have a legally dead body with a pulse and blood circulation but no heartbeat. They'll think we're insane. I took Rebecca's temperature again, 95.6 degrees. In 3 hours inside a refrigeration unit, her body temperature had increased. At 6:45 p.m., Marcus came downstairs to help me with an unrelated pickup. I asked him to witness what we were documenting with Rebecca. He checked her pulse himself, listened with the stethoscope, verified the temperature reading. This is wrong, Marcus said flatly. This violates basic biology. I'm not touching her again. At 7:30 p.m., as I was preparing to leave for the evening, I did one final check. I opened the refrigeration drawer. Rebecca's eyes were open. I'm not talking about the eyelids relaxing naturally, which can happen with deceased bodies. I'm talking about her eyes being wide open, staring directly at the ceiling of the refrigeration unit. The same eyes that had shown fixed, dilated pupils just hours ago were now open and seemed almost focused. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering in my chest. Patricia! My shout echoed through the basement. Patricia ran in from the office. When she saw Rebecca's open eyes, she grabbed my arm. We're closing this case, right now. We're calling the family and telling them we can't perform the service. We're returning her to the medical examiner. I don't care what explanation we give. This ends now. But before we could do anything, Rebecca blinked. I watched it happen. Both of us did. A slow, deliberate blink. Her eyelids closed, then opened again. Her eyes remained fixed on the ceiling, but she had definitely, unmistakably blinked. Get Dr. Morrison back here, I said, right now. Dr. Morrison arrived at 8:10 p.m. By then, Rebecca had blinked 3 more times. He examined her immediately, checking every neurological reflex, every vital sign. Her eyes tracked his penlight now. Her pupils constricted slightly in response to light, but she still had no heartbeat, no respiration, no measurable brain activity according to his handheld EEG device. This is medically impossible, Dr. Morrison said. She's showing cortical response without cardiac or respiratory function. This violates every principle of human physiology. The brain cannot function without oxygenated blood. The blood cannot be oxygenated without breathing. None of this can happen without a beating heart. What do we do? I asked. I'm calling the CDC, Dr. Morrison said. This is beyond anything in my experience. This might be some unknown medical phenomenon that needs to be studied. He made the call right there in our preparation room. I listened to him describe the case to whoever was on the other end. His voice grew increasingly frustrated, as he was apparently transferred multiple times. Finally, he hung up. They want documentation sent through official channels. They are treating this as a probable hoax or error in our monitoring equipment. They won't send anyone until we provide laboratory results proving our claims. So we're on our own, Patricia said. Dr. Morrison nodded. For tonight, yes, I'm ordering a full blood panel. I need to draw samples and send them to the state lab. Maybe her blood chemistry will explain something. He drew 6 vials of blood from Rebecca's arm. The blood was bright red, properly oxygenated, which should have been impossible in a body with no respiratory function. He labeled the vials and said he'd have them couriered to the state laboratory for expedited analysis. I'm staying here tonight, I said. Someone needs to monitor her. Patricia volunteered to stay as well. Dr. Morrison left at 9:30, promising to return first thing in the morning. Patricia and I set up watches in the preparation room. We checked Rebecca every 15 minutes. Each time, something had changed. By 10 p.m., her lips had regained color, shifting from the bluish-gray of death to a natural pink. By 11 p.m., the bruising on her chest was noticeably lighter. By midnight, the laceration on her forehead appeared to be healing, the edges of the wound drawing together. Daniel, Patricia said at 12:30 a.m., what if she's not dead? What if she's in some kind of extreme suspended animation and she's... Waking up? With no heartbeat or breathing? I shook my head. That's not waking up. That's something else entirely. At 1:45 a.m., I was sitting in a chair next to the preparation table where we'd moved Rebecca for easier observation. Her eyes were still open, still tracking light and movement. Her pulse was stronger now, almost normal. Her body temperature had risen to 97.3 degrees. And then she spoke, not loudly, barely a whisper. But she definitely spoke. Cold! I jumped from my chair, my heart racing. Rebecca? Can you hear me? Her eyes moved slightly, seeming to focus on my face. Her lips moved again. So cold. Patricia grabbed her phone. I'm calling an ambulance right now. But before she could dial, Rebecca's eyes rolled back. Her body went completely rigid, every muscle locked in what looked like a seizure. I grabbed her hand, not knowing what else to do, and felt that impossible pulse suddenly accelerate, racing faster and faster. Then it stopped. The pulse vanished completely. Her body relaxed. The color drained from her lips again. The warmth that had been building in her skin dissipated rapidly. I listened with the stethoscope. Nothing. Silence. Complete and final. I checked every pulse point. Nothing. I scanned her temperature. 89 degrees and dropping fast. Rebecca Holloway was dead again. Or perhaps more accurately, she was only dead now. Patricia and I sat in that preparation room until dawn, neither of us speaking, both of us trying to process what we'd witnessed. At 7:20 a.m., Dr. Morrison returned. We explained everything that had happened overnight. He examined Rebecca's body, confirming that all vital signs were now absent and her body was behaving exactly as expected for someone who'd been dead for approximately 22 hours. The blood results came back, Dr. Morrison said quietly. Perfectly normal, slightly elevated potassium consistent with cellular breakdown after death, but otherwise completely unremarkable. Whatever happened here left no trace in her chemistry. The funeral was held 3 days later. I embalmed Rebecca that afternoon after Dr. Morrison's examination. The process was completely normal. Her body showed expected rigor mortis, expected cooling, expected decomposition markers. I performed the restorative work to repair her facial injuries. She looked peaceful in her casket like she was sleeping, but I knew better. Approximately 2 weeks later, we received another case. Motorcycle accident, male victim, age 34, pronounced dead at the scene. When he arrived at Whitestone Memorial, his body was warm, no rigor mortis, and when I checked his carotid artery, I felt that slow, impossible pulse. I refused the case. Patricia took over. She experienced the same phenomena. Body temperature that wouldn't drop, circulation without cardiac function, eyes that opened and tracked movement, and after 8 hours, sudden complete cessation of all activity. The third case came 5 days after that. Drowning victim, female, age 41. Same pattern, same impossible vitality, same eventual finality. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rebecca's face. Her eyes open and aware, her lips forming that single word. Cold. I started researching obsessively. I found nothing in medical literature that explained what we'd witnessed. No documented cases of post-mortem circulation. No records of bodies showing responsiveness hours after clinical death. I spoke with Dr. Morrison repeatedly. He was as haunted as I was. He'd begun questioning every death certificate he'd ever signed, wondering if other bodies had shown similar signs that he'd missed or dismissed. Patricia quit Whitestone Memorial 3 weeks after Rebecca's case. She took a position at a hospice facility where she'd never have to work with bodies again. Marcus transferred to a funeral home in Des Moines. He didn't say goodbye. I lasted 2 more months. In that time, I handled 4 more cases with the same impossible characteristics. Bodies that refused to cool, that showed circulation without heartbeats, that seemed to hover in some state between death and whatever comes after. I submitted my resignation to the owner of Whitestone Memorial on December 19th. I told him I was pursuing other career opportunities. I didn't mention that I can no longer trust my understanding of death itself. I didn't tell him that I lie awake at night wondering how many bodies I've prepared over the years that might have been in that same transitional state. How many people did I embalm who were still, in some incomprehensible way, present? How many times did I insert a trocar into a chest cavity and drain fluids from someone who could still somehow feel it? The worst part is knowing that this is still happening. I've called other funeral homes in the area, spoken carefully with embalmers I trust. A few have admitted experiencing similar phenomena. Bodies that seem too alive, circulation that doesn't make sense. Small movements that get written off as natural settling. They don't talk about it openly because it sounds insane. Because it threatens the fundamental assumptions of their profession. Because if death isn't as final and immediate as we believe, then everything we do in the funeral industry becomes horrifying. I think about Rebecca Holloway every single day. I think about that moment when she looked at me and whispered that she was cold. Was she aware during those 8 hours? Was she trapped in her body, unable to move or communicate except for those brief moments of lucidity? Did she feel pain? Fear? Was she screaming inside her own head while I documented her condition like a curious scientist examining a specimen? I don't know. I'll never know. What I do know is that I can't participate in this profession anymore. I can't treat the newly deceased with clinical detachment when there's even a possibility that they're still somehow present. I can't make the first incision for arterial embalming without wondering if somewhere, in some way I don't understand, they feel it. Dr. Morrison continued investigating for several months. He sent reports to the CDC, to the National Institutes of Health, to medical journals. Every submission was rejected or went unanswered. The medical community doesn't want to acknowledge phenomena that contradict established science. It's easier to dismiss anomalies than to question fundamental assumptions about mortality. I've thought about going public with this story, but who would believe me? There's no physical evidence. The blood work was normal. The photographs show bodies that appeared deceased by all standard measures. Without proof, I'm just another person claiming to have experienced something impossible. But I know what I saw. Patricia knows. Marcus knows. Dr. Morrison knows. And the families of those 6 individuals whose bodies showed these characteristics. They'll never know that their loved ones might have lingered in some twilight state for hours after being pronounced dead. Sometimes, I drive past Whitestone Memorial. The building looks exactly the same. Cream siding, black shutters, oak trees. Families still gather there for services. Bodies are still prepared in the basement. The work continues as it always has, built on the certainty that death is an absolute threshold that, once crossed, is final and irreversible. I used to believe that too. I built a 16-year career on that certainty. Now, I know better. Or, perhaps worse, I know that I don't know anything at all. Death, it turns out, might not be the end of consciousness. It might be a process, a transition that takes hours or days rather than seconds. And during that transition, the deceased might still be present in ways we don't understand and can't measure with our instruments. If that's true, then every funeral home, every morgue, every medical examiner's office is a place of potential horror. We might be cutting into people who can still feel. We might be refrigerating bodies that are still aware. We might be burying or cremating individuals who are trapped in a state between life and death, unable to signal their presence, unable to escape. I can't live with that possibility. I can't walk into a preparation room knowing what I know now. So I'm done. I'm walking away from the only profession I've ever known, from years of training and experience, because I can no longer trust the basic premise that underlies everything we do. The dead, I've learned, might not be as dead as we think, and that realization has destroyed not just my career, but my entire understanding of mortality itself. I think about the families I've served over the years, the grieving parents, widows, children. I provided them comfort by preparing their loved ones for viewing, by making death seem peaceful and dignified. But now, I wonder if I was facilitating something much darker. Was I preserving bodies that were still occupied? Were those peaceful faces masking ongoing awareness? Did those closed eyes hide consciousness that was still struggling to find a way out? These questions have no answers. Or if they do, those answers exist in a realm beyond our current medical understanding, in a space between science and something else entirely. What haunts me most isn't the memory of Rebecca's open eyes or her whispered word. It's the statistical certainty. If this happened with 6 cases out of the hundreds I handled in those final months, how common is this phenomenon? How many bodies across how many funeral homes experience this transitional state? How many thousands of people each year might hover in that twilight zone between clinical death and true finality? And if they're aware during that time, what must they experience? The terror of being unable to move or communicate, the confusion of hearing voices and feeling hands, but being unable to respond, the cold of refrigeration seeping into consciousness, the violation of preparation procedures, the final horror of burial or cremation while some fragment of awareness remains. I don't have those answers. I'm not even sure I want them anymore. All I know is that I can't be part of that system now. I can't participate in an industry built on assumptions that might be fundamentally wrong. I can't trust the pronouncement of death when I've felt impossible pulses in cold bodies. I can't believe in finality when I've watched eyes open hours after they should have been capable of any response. My career as an embalmer is over, but the knowledge I carry from that profession will haunt me for the rest of my life. Every funeral I attend, every obituary I read, every death in my own family will be colored by this terrible uncertainty. Maybe death is exactly what we think it is. An instant transition from life to non-existence, consciousness extinguished like a candle. Maybe the 6 cases I witnessed were anomalies, bizarre medical phenomena that will eventually be explained by science. But maybe not. Maybe death is a journey, not a destination. Maybe consciousness doesn't simply switch off, but gradually fades over hours or days. Maybe the boundary between life and death is much blurrier than we want to believe. And maybe, in funeral homes across this country right now, there are bodies lying in preparation rooms and refrigeration units that are still, in some incomprehensible way, aware of what's being done to them. That possibility is why I walked away. That possibility is why I'll never return. Because if there's even the smallest chance it's true, then the profession I loved has become unbearable.